Yudhiṣṭhira said, "O Keshav, Bhīṣma ranges across the battlefield like an all-consuming fire. We dare not even look at him as he stands with his weapons raised, his face blazing with anger. Even the god of death wielding his mace, or Varuna his noose, or Indra his thunderbolt might be overcome, but not Bhīṣma. O Krishna, I am again thinking of retiring from this battle. So many heroes have died. It is clear that none will survive this fight. Bhīṣma will destroy our forces. We are like insects rushing into a blazing fire. Thus it is preferable to stop now and spend the rest of my days practicing asceticism. What do you advise, O Janardhan? My mind is afflicted by duality and doubt." Even though he had spent the day exerting himself fully as Arjuna's charioteer, Krishna appeared fresh and spotless. The garland of unfading lotuses and necklaces of pearls and gems rested on his chest. Lifting a graceful hand, he replied, "O son of Dharma, do not indulge in grief. On your side you have warriors equal to the gods. All of your brothers still stand ready to do your bidding in the battle, and all of them are invincible. I too am here to do you good, O mighty monarch. Simply order me, and I will personally slay Bhīṣma. For your sake, O son of Pandu, what would I not do? I can challenge Bhīṣma and kill him before Duryodhana's eyes. Even if Arjuna is reluctant, you will not find me so. If you feel that by killing Bhīṣma victory will be attained, then riding out alone, I shall end his life." Krishna glanced affectionately at all the Pandavas. "He who is inimical towards your brothers is my enemy. Your friends are as dear to me as my own relatives. Arjuna is my friend, relative, and disciple. For him I would cut off and give away my own flesh. He too would lay down his own life for my sake. Although I am ready to do whatever is necessary, I think Arjuna should keep his vow. He, not I, should slay the grandfather. There is also the prophecy regarding Shikhandi. Somehow Shikhandi will be involved in Bhīṣma's destruction. The grandfather's death is imminent. He has lost his good sense and no longer knows right from wrong. Let us therefore act now to bring about his end." Yudhiṣṭhira replied, "It is exactly as you say, Madhusudan. You are capable of destroying the entire universe with all its moving and non-moving creatures. With your support alone, I am sure to obtain everything I desire. But I cannot let your words be falsified for my sake. It is already enough that you came close to breaking your promise today. You must not kill Bhīṣma. I think we will be able to find some other means, my lord." Yudhiṣṭhira's brothers nodded their approval. Krishna was like their second self. They would never be able to tolerate hearing him criticized. Krishna's words were meant to guide all men. If he broke his word, then others would follow his example, and the whole world would be ruined. People would disregard his instructions and end up in hell. Remembering what Bhīṣma had said to him at the beginning of the battle, Yudhiṣṭhira said, "It is Bhīṣma himself who will tell us how to kill him. Alas, how vile is a Kshatriya's duty that I must now seek to kill he who became our father when we were fatherless. That one who has always sought our good and loved us as his own, that aged grandsire, I now wish to kill." Consoling the weeping Yudhiṣṭhira, Krishna said, "Take heart, O hero. The son of Ganga has chosen to follow Duryodhana and thus cannot avoid death in this battle. You have spoken rightly. We must hear from Bhīṣma himself how he may be slain. This was his promise to you. Let us go to him now and once more beseech him. If you question him, he will surely speak the truth. O Yudhiṣṭhira, take off your armour and we will go and see the son of Ganga." Servants removed the Pandavas' armour, and they then accompanied Krishna to the core of a camp. They were ushered into Bhīṣma's tent. and they bowed at his feet. Bhīṣma's face lit up when he saw them. He bowed to Krishna with folded palms. "Welcome, O best of the Vrishnis. Welcome too, all you sons of Pandu." Bhīṣma stood resplendent in his white silks. He waved his long arm toward the many fine golden seats arranged around him on the silk rugs in his tent. After his visitors were seated, he took his own seat and said, "What can I do for your delight? I will do it with all my soul, even if it is extremely difficult to accomplish." Yudhiṣṭhira folded his palms. Looking at Bhīṣma, he remembered their years together in Hastinapur. His heart melted and he could hardly speak. Glancing across at Krishna to gain strength, he took a deep breath and addressed the old Kuru leader. "O Bhīṣma, O highly learned man, please tell us how we may gain victory in this fight. How can we put an end to this slaughter? O Lord, please tell us how we may vanquish you. You do not display even the slightest weakness in battle. Your bow is always drawn fully. No one can see when you take up your shafts, place them on your bow and fire them. Who could dare face you when you blazed forth with such awful prowess? Each day you slaughter more of my army, and I fear that soon we shall be ruined. Thus I've come to you again, as you instructed me." Bhīṣma was moved as he looked at Yudhiṣṭhira and his brothers. All of them carried scars from the wounds they had received in the battle. All of them were gazing reverentially at his face. How different they were from Duryodhana and his brothers. Bhīṣma knew that if he told Yudhiṣṭhira now to give up the fight and leave the kingdom to the Kauravas, he would obey. There was nothing the Pandavas would not do to satisfy their elders. If only Dhritarashtra's sons were like these virtuous brothers, this horrible carnage would never have happened. Yet here was Krishna. It was surely his desire and arrangement that all the earth's kings and warriors be destroyed. So many of them were, after all, demonic. Obviously, he wanted to relieve the earth's burden. After a few moments, Bhīṣma said, "O son of Kunti, as long as I am alive, you will not gain victory. I tell you this truly. Strike me down, and victory will be yours. I will permit you, O sons of Kunti, to strike me as you please. When I am slaughtered, then all the others on our side will be overcome." Yudhiṣṭhira spoke with difficulty. "Please tell us in detail how we may achieve this apparently impossible feat, O wise man. We could perhaps vanquish Indra, thunderbolt in hand, or Jamraj wielding his mace, but you appear to be invincible." Bhīṣma held up his hands. "It is as you say, O king. When with these hands I clutch weapons and stand to fight, none can withstand me. Only when I lower my weapons will I be approachable. Here is my vow, which I will not break. I will not raise weapons against one who is weaponless, one whose armour and standard are shattered, one who flies away in fear, one who surrenders, one who has only one son, one who is disabled, a woman, or one who bears the name of a woman. O son of Pandu, I will fight with none of these at any time."
Why only one son?
Because then there's no one for the son to succeed, The father's killed, I guess. Something like that. So you'll find out about that thing about the name of a woman. That was from a prophecy before. It's going to explain it. Bhīṣma placed a hand on Yudhiṣṭhira's shoulder as he spelled out his meaning. "Drupada's valiant and wrathful son, who is known in your army as Shikhandi, it is he who will cause my fall. Formerly he was a woman, as everyone knows. Therefore I will not strike him, even if he attacks me. Place him at the forefront of the fight, and let Arjuna stand behind him. Only Dhananjaya or the illustrious Krishna can bring me down in battle. If Shikhandi faces me, I will not fight. Then it will be possible for Arjuna to slay me. Do this, O Yudhiṣṭhira, and gain victory." When Bhīṣma stopped speaking, the Pandavas rose from their seats. Bowing before him one by one, they touched his feet and asked his permission to leave. Krishna also placed his hands on Bhīṣma's feet and bowed to the floor before him. Then they all left the tent, leaving Bhīṣma alone. As they made their way back to their own camp, Arjuna spoke with Krishna. His face was flushed and his voice choked as he addressed his friend. O Vasudeva, while playing in my childhood, I would soil the high-souled Bhīṣma's garments by climbing onto his lap. Clambering on his body, I would say, Father. That hero would then gently reply, I am not your father, but your father's father, O Bharat. How can I slay him, O Madhav? Let him kill our troops. I cannot kill him under any circumstances. What do you think, O Krishna? Krishna's voice was firm. O Jishnu, having promised to kill Bhīṣma in battle, how can you now avoid that without transgressing your Kshatriya duties? Overthrow him, O son of Kunti. Without slaying Ganga's son in battle, you can never hope to win this war. It's been ordained by the gods that Bhīṣma will soon go to death's abode. Only you can bring him down. Do not hesitate. Hear from me an ancient instruction given by Brihaspati. One should slay even an aged man or an elder, or one endowed with all virtues, if he comes as an enemy, or indeed anyone else who comes for one's destruction. This is the eternal duty of Kshatriyas, O Dhananjay. Fighting, protecting the subjects, and performing sacrifices, all without maliciousness, are their sacred duties. Arjuna looked ahead into the darkness as they rode across the field. He knew he could not avoid this fight, especially as Krishna repeatedly urged him on. Clearly it was his duty. Only sentiment held him back. Somehow he had to get past that. Clutching the reins of his white horse, Arjuna replied dourly, Surely, O Krishna, Shikandi has been born for Bhīṣma's death. As soon as Bhīṣma sees him, he will drop his weapons. Therefore, as Bhīṣma has suggested, let us place Shikandi at the front as we attack the grandfather. I will then do the needful. The Pandavas returned to their camp with mixed feelings. They now knew that victory would be theirs before long, but only at the cost of Bhīṣma's life. Censuring Duryodhana and his old father, they entered their tents to rest for the night. After describing to Dhritarashtra the fights that resulted in the death of his sons, Sanjay fell silent. The blind king was weeping again, beating his chest and tossing about on his great throne. Alas, everything is my fault. Why did I not listen to Vidura? Where is my learned brother now? Where will all this end, Sanjay? What refuge is there for an old and weary man, bereft of his sons and other relations? Sanjay tried to console the monarch as he vented his grief. He had little to say. The battle was taking its inevitable course. Dhritarashtra had been told many times about the outcome. Now Bhīma was systematically destroying his sons, just as he had vowed. 10 sons every day, 100 sons. So in 10 days they'd all be killed, except for Duryodhana. But would even that make Dhritarashtra realize his fault? His self-condemnation was certainly nothing new. Every time the Kauravas suffered a reverse, he expressed his remorse, but those feelings dissolved whenever he heard that they had won a battle. As the king's sobbing subsided, Sanjay continued describing the battle in full. Sure enough, as he described how Bhīṣma was coursing through the battle like death personified, the king was enlivened. He sat forward and listened carefully as Sanjay told him how the grandfather had routed the Pandava troops. Then Sanjay told him of the episode in Bhīṣma's tent. Dhritarashtra was aghast. Why has our grandsire revealed how he may die? How can that be his duty? I think he has become weary of the fight. Surely he is favouring Pandu's sons over mine. Alas, I do not think I'll be able to hear of the next day's fighting, bringing as it will the fall of such a hero. Dhritarashtra's wails again filled the empty chamber where he and Sanjay sat. They echoed mournfully around the hall as Sanjay looked across at the ornate seat where Bhīṣma used to sit. Chapter 12, the fall of Bhīṣma. As sunrise approached on the 10th day, the sounds of thousands of drums, cymbals, conches and trumpets filled the air. Donning their armour and taking up their blood-stained weapons, the warriors came forward for battle. The Pandavas arranged for Shikandi to ride in his chariot at the forefront of their formation. Bhīma and Arjuna protected his two flanks, and behind him came Abhimanyu and Draupadi's sons. Then, spreading out in a fan behind them, all the Panchalas, headed by Drishtadyumna, Satyaki and Chekitana, stood ready to fight. Other powerful Rathas and Maharathas protected the formation's key points. With a joyful roar, they rushed at the Kauravas. Bhīṣma stood at the centre of the Kaurava formation. Duryodhana ordered his best fighters to surround and protect him. He knew the Pandavas would target him. Until they checked Bhīṣma, their success would be uncertain. Duryodhana himself stayed close to his grandfather, carefully watching the Pandavas' moves. As the two armies clashed, the slaughter began. Knowing that it would likely be his last day, Bhīṣma made one final and supreme effort. If he were to fall, then he should go down fighting to the best of his ability. He let loose his arrows on the Pandava troops in incessant showers, and countless men, horses and elephants fell under his assault. It began to seem as if Bhīṣma was present everywhere as he wheeled about in the battle. All 5 Pandavas went towards him, awed by his power. They honoured him in their minds. With depressed hearts, they gazed at him, even as the gods had gazed at Vritrasura. Vritrasura was the demon who was killed by Indra, but he was actually a great devotee. In his previous life, he was Chitraketu, and he got cursed by Mother Durga because he made a remark against Shiva one time that, Mother Durga was sitting on Shiva's lap, and Chitraketu was going there, and he was an old friend of Shiva from their school days before, and he made some remark. He said, "Oh, what is this? Hardly any clothes, and the wife is sitting in his lap in public in front of the sages. What kind of behaviour is this?" he said, Chitraketu. And Shiva himself, he didn't think anything. He said, "Oh, he's my old friend, it's just a foolish remark," or something like that. But Mother Durga, she took great offence. And she said, "I curse you because you think you're better than Shiva, the great Mahadev, so you'll have to take a demonic birth." And Chitraketu was a devotee, great devotee, so he could have counteracted that curse himself, but he said, "I accept your curse on my head." And after some time, he continued in his life as Chitraketu. Many things happened. In his next birth, he was Vritrasura, born in the Daitya dynasty. The demons are called Daityas because they're born from Diti. Diti is the mother of the demons, and Aditi is the mother of the demigods. Like Surya, the sun, is the 8th son of Aditi. Aditi Nandan, right? Yeah. Means Surya, actually. Surya. That's why he's shining like Surya, isn't it? Hare Krishna. So then, so as Vritrasura, he engaged in battle with Indra because he was destined to fight Indra to the death. And there was a great battle, and a lot of teachings and philosophy was there exchanged between them. Eventually, Vritrasura was killed, and he went back to Krishna. And Indra finally, he cut off his arms and legs and everything, and he was still fighting. Finally, Indra, with his thunderbolt, he was trying to cut off his head, and it took 100 years for the thunderbolt on his neck for his head to come off. Yudhiṣṭhira. So he's famous in the annals of the history. In the Bhagavatam, it's in the 7th canto, I believe, somewhere in the beginning, the story of Yudhiṣṭhira. So this says, even the gods had gazed at Yudhiṣṭhira. He was, Bhīṣma that is, was consuming their forces like a fire swallowing a forest. Standing between Bhīma and Arjuna, Shikhandi roared out his challenge and sent 3 arrows at Bhīṣma. They struck him on the chest, penetrating his armour. Bhīṣma felt his anger rise, but with a slight smile he called out, "Oh, Shikhandi, I'll never strike you in this fight. You are even now the same person the Creator made you before, and are no match for me." That's a great insult, saying you're a woman, even though you're in a male body now, but I know who you are. Shikhandi was infuriated by Bhīṣma's words. "You are the destroyer of Kshatriyas, O mighty armed hero. I have heard of your fight with Parashuram, and have seen for myself your prowess. Still I will fight with you. Whether you fight back or not, I will slay you in battle. Know this for certain, O afflictor of foes. Take a good view of this world while you can, for you will not escape from me with your life." Shikhandi at once fired 5 more arrows that pierced Bhīṣma in the shoulder. Wincing, Bhīṣma turned away from Shikhandi and attacked the warriors surrounding him. Arjuna came up next to Shikhandi and said, "Maintain your assault on the grandfather, mighty armed hero. He will not be able to harm you. I will protect you from any other fighters who come to his aid. Today we must lay Bhīṣma low or face the derision of our own men." Shikhandi longed for Bhīṣma to fight with him. He sent clusters of swift arrows at the Kuru commander, striking him all over, but Bhīṣma did not respond. Moving back and around in a circle, Bhīṣma avoided Shikhandi and at the same time rained down his shafts on the Pandavas. A huge division of elephant warriors and thousands of charioteers supported him. Duryodhana personally marshalled his forces around Bhīṣma, ensuring that he was carefully guarded on all sides. With a roar, Arjuna charged into the fray. Shooting countless arrows, he carved a path through the Kauravas. As he ranged about, leaving in his wake a trail of destruction, Duryodhana was alarmed and approached Bhīṣma. "O sire, behold how my troops are being routed by the enraged Arjuna. As a herdsman belabours his herd with a cudgel, so Arjuna belabours my troops with his Gandiva. O mighty hero, I see no other shelter than your illustrious self." Bhīṣma lowered his bow and looked at Duryodhana. "O best of men, hear my words. Before the battle began, I vowed I would slaughter 10,000 men a day. I have kept my vow. Now I will make one final promise. Today, either I will kill the Pandavas or they will kill me. Thus I will liquidate the debt I owe you, arising from the food you gave me, by throwing off my mortal coil in the thick of battle." Without another word, Bhīṣma moved off and began scattering arrows among the Pandava forces. Like the sun drawing moisture with its rays, he robbed the strength of all heroes who approached him. Having slain 10,000 swift-moving elephants and 10,000 chargers with their riders, as well as a full 100,000 infantry, he stood on the field like a smokeless fire. The Pandavas could not look at him. Arjuna again enthused Shikhandi. "Go toward Bhīṣma, O hero. Do not fear. I will dislodge him from his chariot with my sharp arrows." Prabhu, could you give me that thing there? Put it by my back. This wall's really cold. Sorry. It's going to come on my back. Thanks. Shikhandi again challenged Bhīṣma, followed by Drishtadhyumna, Abhimanyu, Drupada and Virata. The Kuru warriors, however, checked their advance. There was a terrible encounter between the enraged warriors. Arrows, lances, darts, and maces flew through the air, and the screams of the soldiers mixing with the clash of the weapons was intolerable. With Shikhandi before him, Arjuna steadily approached Bhīṣma. Seeing him moving determinedly towards the grandfather, Yudhiṣṭhira came before him. That's the younger brother of Duryodhana. Yudhiṣṭhira was the one who dragged Draupadi by the hair into the assembly, because initially Duryodhana told a servant to go and get Draupadi from her chambers to insult her, and the servant went and just, Draupadi sent him back with a flea in his ear, said, "No, I'm busy, go away," So then Duryodhana sent Yudhiṣṭhira, and he went right inside the women's quarters and dragged her out by the hair. It was a terrible thing, And then because he took a vow, then Bhīma, in front of everyone, that he would kill Yudhiṣṭhira, and he would cut him open and pull out his heart and drink his blood, He actually did that, but it's mentioned in Mahabharata that Mother Gandhari, the mother of the 100 brothers of Duryodhana, she was appalled at such cannibalism. But it said that he didn't actually drink the blood, he just squeezed the heart and the blood went on his mouth. He didn't swallow it. That was okay then.
What a relief.
And but he was also a great warrior, Maharata, and Yudhiṣṭhira, at some point in one of the encounters, he engaged with Arjuna, was fighting really, really well, Arjuna couldn't overcome him at that time. Yudhiṣṭhira came before Arjuna to stop him getting closer to Bhīṣma Dev. He checked Arjuna with a volley of shafts. Dismissing fear from his mind, he withstood the Pandava like the shore resisting the ocean. The two fighters contended like Indra and Mayasura, meeting in the celestial realm in the days of yore. Yudhiṣṭhira stopped Arjuna with 25 shafts, then struck Krishna with 3 more. Incensed at seeing Krishna attacked, Arjuna sped 100 long shafts at Yudhiṣṭhira. Penetrating his armour, they drank his blood and made him gasp with pain. Without delay, he sent back 3 arrows that struck Arjuna on the forehead. As blood streamed down his face, Arjuna was as beautiful as Mount Meru, with its towering crests stained with red oxides. Laughing loudly, Arjuna cut Yudhiṣṭhira's bow with 3 crescent-headed shafts fired simultaneously. He followed that at once with 50 more hammer-headed arrows that smashed the core of his chariot. Arjuna shot 100 more spiked arrows towards Yudhiṣṭhira as his chariot fell apart around him. Without losing his composure, Yudhiṣṭhira resisted Arjuna's attack by firing his own razor-headed shafts, which cut down Arjuna's arrows in mid-air. All the warriors who saw this marvellous feat cheered Yudhiṣṭhira. The core of a prince felt encouraged and launched another 20 arrows at Arjuna. Struck by his shafts, Arjuna blazed up in fury. He sent so many arrows at Yudhiṣṭhira that the prince was forced to flee. With his body pierced all over, he ran 300 paces and mounted Bhīṣma's chariot. With all their principal warriors at their head, both armies faced each other for a violent exchange of weapons. Bhīṣma was backed by Duryodhana, Drona, Kripa, Ashvatthama, and all the other Kuru heroes, while the 5 Pandavas, backed by Dhrishtadyumna, Shikhandi, Satyaki, Abhimanyu, and the other Pandava fighters, all stood against them. They fought like the gods and asuras. Watching the fight, Drona spoke to his son, who was stationed by his side. "It seems, my dear Ashvatthama, that Arjuna will exert himself fully to destroy Bhīṣma. See how he targets the grandfather again and again, keeping Shikhandi by his side. I am seeing many evil omens. My arrows seem to fall from my quiver and will not fit themselves to my bow. I feel my enthusiasm wane. All around us I hear the cries of carnivorous birds and beasts. Even the earth seems to cry out in pain, and the sun is dimmed. Though clad in bright armour, the kings on our side do not shine. All these signs indicate that our illustrious sire will soon fall. Drona urged his son to challenge Arjuna. This is not the time when dependents should think of their own lives. Fixing your mind on heaven, dear son, confront the roaring Dhananjaya. That diadem-decked hero is agitating our army like a storm tossing the ocean. Listen to the cries of men and the constant crack of his bowstring. Go quickly and exert yourself fully to check your godbrother before he destroys us all. Ashvatthama moved off at once, supported by Shalya, Kripa and Bhagadatta, along with another 6 Kaurava Maharathas. All 10 warriors advanced in a body toward Arjuna. Bhīṣma challenged them when he saw their intention. All 10 of them trained their weapons on the powerful Pandava, but he remained unmoved by their attack. He cheerfully assailed every one of them with his own arrows, each of which resembled one of Indra's blazing lances. The Kaurava warriors found themselves completely engaged by Bhīṣma alone. With roars of delight, he held them all at bay. As other battles raged around him, Arjuna focused on Bhīṣma's chariot. After beating back an attack from Shusharma and his brother Chitrasena, he rushed at Bhīṣma like an elephant rushing at another for the sake of a mate. Quickly, Bhagadatta placed his elephant in Arjuna's way, but the Pandava sent it reeling with a volley of swift arrows. Then Shikandi was again before Bhīṣma. He rained countless arrows on his chariot. Still, Bhīṣma refused to fight with him. Instead, he bore his attack patiently while maintaining his assault on the soldiers supporting him. Bhīṣma resembled Rudra at the end of the creation. No one who came within range of his arrows escaped. Only Arjuna was able to withstand his attack and approach him, along with Shikandi, who was still unharmed. When only Arjuna and Shikandi were left standing against Bhīṣma, Shikandi pierced him in the chest with 10 broad-headed arrows. Bhīṣma gazed at him as if to burn him by that look, but he did not attack. Urged on by Arjuna, Shikandi attacked Bhīṣma more and more fiercely. Arjuna also shot his golden-winged arrows at the grandsire. Bhīṣma fought only Arjuna, disregarding Shikandi's arrows, which wounded him in every part of his body. As Arjuna and Shikandi closed on Bhīṣma, Dushasana came again to protect him. Cheered by the Kauravas, he single-handedly resisted the arrows of Bhīṣma's 2 assailants. Other charioteers came up to support Arjuna, but Dushasana struck them down. Dhritarashtra's 2nd son exhibited his prowess, allowing Duryodhana to marshal more troops for Bhīṣma's protection. Arjuna was infuriated. Losing all patience, he sent arrows that struck Dushasana like thunderbolts and tore off his armour, sending it crashing to the ground. The Kaurava fell from his chariot, then got up and ran. By then a large force of Kaurava warriors had come to surround Bhīṣma. Numerous tribes of barbarians, clad in animal skins and clutching bludgeons and spears, rushed at Arjuna. Thousands of other soldiers galloped forward, screaming their battle cries and hurling spiked lances. Not caring for their attack, Arjuna sent flaming arrows charged with mystic power. Sheets of fire-tipped shafts swept through the barbarian ranks. They fell by the thousands, making the ground impassable. Those that were not slain turned back and fled. Arjuna again turned his attention to Bhīṣma, who was now supported by Duryodhana, Kripa, Shalya, and a number of Dhritarashtra's other sons. All those Kuru heroes trained their arrows on Arjuna. The other 4 Pandavas attacked Bhīṣma's protectors. Numerous Kaurava fighters were struck down by Pandu's sons as they fired their searing shafts. Bhīṣma and Arjuna contended like two lions. Neither could find any gap in their opponent's defences. Both invoked celestial weapons that the other neutralized. Each praised the other's prowess as they fought. Arjuna covered Bhīṣma's chariot with arrows. Taking the opportunity, other Pandava fighters came forward to support Arjuna. Backed by innumerable chariots, Bhīma, the twins, Yudhiṣṭhira, Satyaki, Abhimanyu, Ghatotkacha, and other principal Pandava warriors pressed forward in the battle. Duryodhana and the best of the Kauravas' warriors met them. Coming out from underneath Arjuna's attack, Bhīṣma assailed every one of the heroes who came toward him. With one razor-headed shaft, he slew Satanika, Virata's beloved brother. Bhīṣma rained down death-dealing shafts that destroyed Satanika's entire division of chariot warriors. At the same time, he held off Arjuna's attack, as well as the attacks of other fighters. The Kuru commander seemed to be sporting as he battled against the hundreds of warriors. He danced on the terrace of his chariot as if he'd regained his youth. Like the rising sun dispersing clouds, he dispersed the Pandava forces with his sun-like arrows. Untouched by Bhīṣma's attack, Shikhandi moved closer to his chariot. From time to time, Bhīṣma threw a deriding glance at him, but he focused his energy on slaughtering the Pandava forces. He knew the Pandavas had decided to bring him down today, and they pressed in on him on all sides. Like clouds covering the sun, they surrounded the old Kuru fighter and trained their weapons on him. Spiked and razor-headed arrows, battle axes, maces, mallets, lances, bludgeons, darts and javelins fell toward Bhīṣma, but Bhīṣma only smiled. His armour was shattered, and he had been pierced many times. Oblivious to pain, he fought on, embracing a hero's end. His chariot wheeling in the midst of his attackers, he spun around and fired arrows in all directions. Sensing that it was now time to defeat Bhīṣma, Arjuna again placed Shikhandi in front of him and rushed forward. With a perfectly aimed arrow, he cut apart Bhīṣma's bow. As the Maharajas of both armies engaged, Arjuna and Shikhandi came before Bhīṣma, both of them firing barbed arrows that pierced him deeply. Arjuna killed his horses and charioteer and brought his chariot to a halt. With a crescent-headed arrow, he brought down his standard. Bhīṣma took up another bow worked with gold and ivory, but Arjuna immediately shattered it. Without a second's delay, Bhīṣma hurled a lance at Arjuna, but Arjuna fired 5 broad-headed arrows that broke the lance into 6 pieces. They fell to earth like forks of lightning. Arjuna thwarted all of Bhīṣma's weapons. Bhīṣma looked at Krishna, who was expertly guiding Arjuna's swift-footed horses. Bhīṣma knew it was the end, as fate had ordained. He could not win a battle when Krishna was on the opposite side. Even though Krishna was not fighting, his mere presence was sufficient to ensure the Pandavas' invincibility. Bhīṣma lowered his weapons. All his skill and power would prove to no avail now. Bhīṣma began to think of death. In the heavens, the assembled rishis, along with the 8 Vasus, addressed Bhīṣma. We also desire that you stop fighting. Withdraw your heart from the battle. It is time. Bhīṣma alone heard the heavenly voices. Suddenly, a cool, fragrant breeze began to blow. Celestial drums resounded, and flowers fell from the sky. As Bhīṣma stood in thought, Shikhandi raised his bow and shot 9 shafts that struck him full on the chest. At the same time, Arjuna fired 25 short, thick arrows that struck Bhīṣma with a tremendous power. Arjuna quickly followed them with 100 steel shafts. Stunned, Bhīṣma resolved to make one final assault on Arjuna. He would go down fighting. There could be no other way. Firing a volley of shafts, Bhīṣma thwarted the attacks of both Arjuna and Shikhandi. Arjuna quickly cut Bhīṣma's bow. With hot tears pricking his eyes, he fired thousands of straight shafts that pierced Bhīṣma's mighty frame, like snakes entering the holes in mountains. Although both Arjuna and Shikhandi shot their arrows at Bhīṣma simultaneously, the Kuru hero considered that only Arjuna's shafts were capable of bringing him down. He called out to Dushasan, who had rushed to his side, "These arrows resembling thunderbolts and coming at me in a straight line end to end are Arjuna's and not Shikhandi's. I can distinguish between them because they have the touch like a Brahmin's rod or of Indra's thunderbolt weapon. Even the gods could not resist them. Like furious snakes with protruding eyes, they penetrate my vital organs. Only Arjuna can bring me down. Even the world's monarchs united could not afflict me." With one last supreme effort, Bhīṣma raised a massive lance and hurled it at Arjuna with all his strength. Arjuna cut it into 100 pieces. Bending the Gandiva to a full circle, he fired arrows 20 at a time in a continuous line. Seeing Shikhandi directly before him, Bhīṣma lowered his weapons and did not resist Arjuna's attack. Arrows struck him in waves. There was no space thicker than 2 fingers' width on his body that was not pierced. Before the Kaurava's shocked eyes, he fell headlong from his chariot. With his head pointed toward the east, he lay fully supported by Arjuna's arrows. No part of his body touched the earth. The Kuru army was overwhelmed by sorrow. Cries of grief rippled across the field. From the sky a celestial voice resounded. "How can this hero, the illustrious son of Ganga, leave his body when the sun is in its inauspicious southern course?" Hearing that voice, Bhīṣma replied, "I am still living." He had noted the course of the sun and, by his father's boon, had decided to wait until it moved toward the north before dying. He knew the Vedic instructions that a yogi should leave his body only when the sun was in its northern track. Until then he would lie on the battlefield as befitted a warrior, awaiting his final moment. Death would not take him until he desired it. Duryodhana and his followers were utterly confused. They did not know what to do or where to go. They dropped their weapons and wailed. As the sun reached the western horizon, the Kauravas stood about the battlefield, dispirited and afflicted by grief. No one could find the strength to move for some time. On the side of the Pandavas, conches were blown and soldiers cheered. Thousands of drums were beaten and trumpets and horns sounded. Word of Bhīṣma's fall spread around the battlefield in moments. The warriors of both armies stopped fighting and stood wherever they were, their minds stunned by the impossible news. Some men wept aloud, others ran wildly around, and some swooned. Assuming the form of swans, celestial rishis descended from the heavens and walked around the fallen Bhīṣma, who lay with his mind absorbed in yogic meditation. Seers, siddhas and charanas praised Bhīṣma from the skies. As darkness fell, the earth seemed to cry out, "This one is the best of all Veda-knowing sages." Duryodhana breathed long and heavy sighs. He rode swiftly to Drona, who had been taken to a distance from Bhīṣma, and told him of his fall. Hearing the news, Drona fell from his chariot in a faint. When he returned to his senses, he ordered the Kauravas to withdraw. Duryodhana, Drona, Kripa, and all the other Kuru leaders made their way sorrowfully toward where Bhīṣma lay. Seeing Bhīṣma at last felled, Bhīma leapt from his chariot and danced on the battlefield. Arjuna, however, was sober. He asked Krishna to drive his chariot over to the Kuru chief. Dismounting with bow in hand, he went over to the fallen warrior and knelt by his side. "Please instruct me what I can do for you, O sire," he asked, struggling to control his voice as his grief rose. "Command me at once and consider it done." Bhīṣma opened his eyes. He spoke with difficulty. "O Falguni, see how my head hangs down. Fetch me a suitable pillow, O hero. You alone are equal to this task." Understanding Bhīṣma's desire, Arjuna lifted his bow and fired several arrows charged by Vedic mantras. The arrows stuck in the ground beneath Bhīṣma's head and formed a headrest. Bhīṣma smiled. His arms were pierced all over and resting on arrows, but he raised his right hand from the wrist to bless Arjuna. "O son of Pandu, you have properly understood my desire. This is the only fitting pillow for a warrior slain on the battlefield." Bhīṣma looked around. He was surrounded both by Pandavas and Kauravas. They stood with folded palms and gazed at his face. Duryodhana and his brothers were shamefaced. They had failed to protect their finest fighter and the leader of their forces. The old grandfather and Kuru guide had fallen. Remorse consumed Duryodhana's heart. It was by his insistence only that this war was being fought, and Bhīṣma was now lying on the battlefield covered in arrows. Seeing the Kauravas' shame and sorrow, Bhīṣma reassured them. "I have attained the end always sought by heroes. This bed is to me no less than an excellent bed of the finest down and silk. Soon I will see my ever-living ancestors in the blissful realms of paradise. Why should I lament?" As Bhīṣma spoke, a number of skilled physicians arrived, carrying herbs and balms. Bhīṣma raised his head to speak, his rasping voice barely rising above a whisper. "O kings of the earth, after paying proper respects to these Brahmins who know mantras, and then rewarding them, please dismiss them. I have no more need of physicians. My end has come, and I am ready for it. It is not my duty to allow myself to be treated by these physicians. I want to die from these arrows. Let me lie here until the sun reaches the point of the compass occupied by Vaishravana. Then I will depart for the higher regions." Bhīṣma's head fell back onto the arrows, and he closed his eyes. Duryodhana sent the Brahmins away. He stood for some time in silence, looking at the fallen hero. Then, sighing, he and his brothers and all the kings supporting the Kauravas circumambulated Bhīṣma with folded palms. They slowly made their way back to camp, seeing nothing but desolation before them. The Pandavas also offered respects to Bhīṣma before returning to their camp. As they went, Yudhiṣṭhira said to Krishna, "O Janardana, surely victory comes to a man through your grace, and defeat overtakes him through your wrath. You are our sole refuge. You assure your devotees of your protection. Nothing is wonderful for one who has taken shelter of you, O Madhav." Krishna replied, "These words, O foremost of all the earth's rulers, could only have fallen from your lips." Feeling sure that they would soon attain victory, the Pandavas rested for the night, while the Kauravas lay tossing in grief. That's the end of that chapter. So the next day, Duryodhana had to appoint Dronacharya as the leader of the forces, and he was a fantastic fighter as well. And he had an amazing fight with Arjuna, because he trained Arjuna. But when they were fighting, he couldn't defeat Arjuna. He was older, of course, old, and covered in scars, in his body. And his son, as it mentioned before, was Ashvatthama. So Ashvatthama was kind of like Dvija Bandhu. He was half Brahmin, because Dronacharya was a Brahmin, but also Kshatriya, and he trained the Pandavas. So later on, when Duryodhana was lying close to death with his spine broken by Bhima's mace, Ashvatthama thought he could do one final service to Duryodhana so he wouldn't die completely disappointed. And he thought he would kill the 5 Pandavas and bring them their heads. So, but he was trying to understand how he could do that. So in the evening, Ashvatthama, with the last few remaining Kaurava leaders, Kripacharya, he was a Brahmin also, and there was 3 or 4 of them, I forget who, but they were going to be taking rest for the night. And Ashwatthama this was outside some distance from the camp of the Pandavas, who'd all retired in their tents for the night. And so these Kauravas were some distance away, and they were going to be taking rest. So the others had taken rest, and Ashwatthama was awake. He was obsessed with this idea that he had to bring the 5 heads of the Pandavas to Duryodhana. But how would he do it? Then as he was pacing up and down, worrying about this, he noticed that there were crows on the tree above, and the crows were sitting, you know how they sit at a distance from each other, like this, in a line on the branch. Suddenly an owl came out of the night and swooped down and was killing the crows. So he got the idea, oh, I should kill them in their sleep. They're very treacherous, you know. Yeah, so he made this plan. So he did prayers, special prayers to Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva appeared to him in a very terrible form with 5 heads and 8 arms and covered in blood and with all these weapons. And he gave Ashwatthama a special sword that was charged with mantras, an invincible sword. And in this way, with this sword, he could enter the camp and go to the centre of the camp, the royal tents where the Pandavas were sleeping, and be able to kill them. So Ashwatthama woke up his friends and he told them what his plan was. And Kripacharya said, this is terrible, you can't do this, this is completely against all the laws of Dharma and everything. And Ashwatthama said, no, I've decided, this is the only way. So he did that. He went in and he was killing everyone left and right, and then he got to the tent in the middle, and he went in and he saw 5 figures asleep there. So he quickly went and cut their heads, put them in a bag, and he left. And then he came to, the next day he came to where Duryodhana was lying, and he says, oh, I brought you the heads of the Pandavas. And Duryodhana was nearly at death's door, and he said, oh, okay, let me feel them. And he put out his hand and he was feeling, and he could immediately tell this wasn't the Pandavas. He said, you've killed their sons, the 5 sons of the Pandavas. Oh. Yeah. So that would be Draupadi's 5 sons, were killed. So terrible. And as a result of that, of course, Ashwatthama was arrested by Arjuna. And Arjuna was very, very angry. He was going to kill him. And Ashwatthama, because he had the Brahmin blood, he was trying to escape from Arjuna. He was a great warrior in his own right, of course, because he had a special blessing from Lord Shiva that he couldn't be killed except. So what he did was, Ashwatthama, there were some Brahmins sitting together on the bank of the Ganga reciting mantras and doing a yajna. So he snuck in among them, and he was sitting there kind of hiding, But Arjuna just went in there and dragged him out. And he took him in front of Draupadi, and he was going to kill him. And then Draupadi relented. She said, don't kill him. There's been so much killing already. And then if you kill him, what about his wife and his mother? They'll just be lamenting like I'm lamenting. So what Arjuna was, he cut off the thing on the top of his head. They wear a jewel, Brahmins, inside their hair, and that jewel contains their Shakti, their Tejas. So he cut that off, and then he was become weak, helpless. And then he was banished by Krishna. He said you'd be banished, and you would have to wandering till the end. I think it was the end of Kali Yuga, something like that. And Ashwatthama was,
So he's still somewhere around?
Pardon?
He's still around?
Still around somewhere.
Well,
in case you meet him.
He's around until the end of Kali Yuga.
You can't miss him.
Must be.
Or maybe no, maybe it wasn't the end of Kali Yuga. He was banished from the realm. That's the 7 rishis who lived at the end of Kali Yuga, like Vedavyas and Asita and some rishis, yeah. But And that was interesting because later on, Gandhari, all her sons were killed, 100 sons, only Duryodhana was left. So when he was still alive, she went, this was before, when the battle was still happening, just near the end, and she went to, she thought if she goes there personally to the battlefield, then the son will be saved, Duryodhana. So she'll have one son to continue the dynasty, you know. So she went there with her people, and they were in their place, in the tents, you know, near on the side of the battlefield. And she had this plan that she would bless Duryodhana, that his body would become invincible like diamond, as hard as diamond, so he couldn't be killed. Because she, all the time when the battle was going on, you know, she had a blindfold. She took the vow that she wouldn't, because Duryodhana was blind from birth, so she didn't want to be superior to him in anything, so she wore the blindfold. So she'd been doing tapasya, you know, doing yoga all the time while the battle was going on. Because of this, she developed a lot of Shakti. So her idea was that she would call Duryodhana, and she would look on his body, just lift the blindfold for a few seconds, and her gaze, the fire from her gaze would like crystallize his body to be like as hard as a thunderbolt. So that was her plan. So she said to Duryodhana, "Come to me to my tent, naked, tomorrow morning." So then the next morning, Duryodhana was crossing to the tent, and Krishna came out. Coincidentally.
Yeah.
He said, "What are you doing, Duryodhana? You can't go around naked like that. You know, at least but wear a gamcha, you know." So he put on the gamcha. So when he went into Gandhari, she looked on him, so his whole body became invincible, except for this part. So later on, that's why he was killed, because Bhīṣma hit his thigh, you know, with the mace.
Forbidden hit.
Yeah. Then she was so angry on Krishna because of that. What is it? You know, she said, "I curse you, Krishna, that your whole Vrishni dynasty, the Yadavas, will be destroyed within, I think it was so many 300 days or something like that." And Krishna was very happy with that curse, because he was thinking the end of the Dwapara Yuga, beginning of Kali Yuga now, and I have to leave and go back to my abode. But when I leave, all my family dynasty will also have to leave. But how to arrange that? Then, the curse of Gandhari, that they would be killed by like a civil war, you know. So he said, "Yes, I accept your curse, mother." You know, and that's what happened. They became intoxicated, and they were fighting with each other, killing each other with the iron rods.
Yeah, growing as
in the lake. Yeah, the reeds became iron, because that was going back to a previous story when the boys had wanted to make a joke on the rishis in the court in Hastinapur. So they put this iron ball, and they dressed this boy up in a sari like a woman, and he put an iron ball under here, and pretending he was pregnant. So he came before the rishi and said, "Oh, this pregnant lady, she's seeking your blessings, oh wise ones, you know." And they immediately could understand it was a trick. So they gave a curse or something, and the iron ball was smashed to powder, and the powder was thrown in the lake, in the water. So later on, because it was in the water, the reeds of the lake came like metal, like solid metal. So when they become intoxicated, apparently the Yadavas had this tendency for intoxication. But, you know, Kshatriyas, they can do that. Sometimes they can eat flesh, take intoxication. Because when Shishupal was insulting Krishna, and Krishna said he'll accept 99 insults, and 100th time, then he'll kill Shishupal. So Krishna was waiting patiently, and Shishupal was, "You're this, you're that, you know. Why should we listen to you? Why should you be given the prominent position in this assembly? So many wise ones are here, and you just Gopa, you don't follow any rules and regulations of Vedic law, and so many things, insulting him like this. And everyone was shocked, but then Krishna's waiting, but one thing he said was, and you're protecting these Yadavas, and they're just like debauchees, and always drinking, always taking liquor, So maybe they used to do that, I don't know. But, so that's what happened. They became intoxicated and all killed each other. And that was the end of the dynasty. Hare Krishna. Please chant. Really? Jai. Jai Maharaj ki Jai. Hari Harai Namah Krishna Yudhiṣṭhira. Yadavaya Mandavaya Keshavaya Namah. Gopal Govinda Ram Srimad Sudam. Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohana. Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra. Hara Hara Shiva Shakti Gaura Bhaktavi. Jai Rupa Sanatam Bhatta Raghuna. Viva Gopala Bhatta Tasa Raghunatha. Go Jai Ami Bhaji Bhanava. Jai Te Vignana Savishta Pura. Ima Muritanu Dasa. Annavara Padarenu Mura Pancha. Jai Goshaiva Ajay Kolabhaza. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Kaurila Prakasha. Anande Polo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Shri Guru Vaishnava Bhaja. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Kodiyacha. Harinam Sankirtana Kohina Tamudasa. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Gaura Haribo. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jai. Nam Sankirtan ki Jai. Jai Shri Mahabharata ki jai, Shri Gurudev ki jai. Gaura Premanandi Hari Bol.